Okay. Hi everybody. I am in the process of getting things set up to stream live, and hopefully it looks like we're working. I'm going to be right back, and thank you for joining. Give me just about 2 minutes. All right. Thank you for the slight delay there. Wendy will be here in just a moment, and let me mute my sound so I don't disturb myself here.
Get another water, probably.
Okay.
Get another water.
All right. Wendy will be here in just a moment, and I'll introduce us again. But thank you for joining us. Let me make sure that turn the volume down on that too. Hopefully we're streaming now properly. I hope so. She'll be here in just a second.
See how the lighting and everything is.
I think it's good.
Turn around here. Hello, everybody. Let's see how the sound is. Is my head cut off a little bit?
Let's see how that is. We're about 10 seconds behind real time, so.
Alrighty.
Okay. as usual, we always have to get our technical ducks in a row first. But thank you for joining us. My name is Steve McGue,
And I'm Wendy McGue.
and we're the founders of Women and Couples Wellness, and have been working in areas dealing with relationships, sexual health, and all things related to couples in that arena for about 12 years. And over that time, we've worked with a lot of people, many thousand people actually. Now, what is different about our approach is we are not therapists. We do have doctorates in human sexuality, focusing on clinical sexology, and have a lot of background in that area and other science areas. But our focus has been on how to improve the relationship of couples and how to enhance their quality of life and their experience. We don't focus on pathology or anything of that nature. And one thing that we always like to say anytime we talk about anything related to, it's just the stream speed, it should be okay, is that this is not medical advice, and this is not therapy. We are simply sharing some information about skills that we've learned, and hopefully it will help improve your quality of life and help you enjoy life more. But if you have anything that you feel like you need to see a doctor about or a therapist, please do that. This is not a replacement for that. This is just a list of suggestions that you might want to consider for, again, for enjoying life more.
And with individuals we coach, we always work with their doctors. We're not a replacement. So.
Yes, absolutely. I've got a few notes here to hopefully keep me on track, because as people that know me, I tend to kind of wander around.
And you can always ask questions. We're checking the live chat as we go here.
Yes, in fact, let me get the laptop up here so I can see that a little better. Or I will try to, hopefully.
And we'll announce this later, but we're excited about more upcoming programs that we have. And we'll go into more details about those soon. Programs that we.
Okay, we got the chat live here. All right. Hopefully I can, I think we're within the screen here. We've got about a 10-second delay on everything, so so it's kind of, okay, cool. What we're going to talk about today is how to deal with the pandemic and the stresses that we all are dealing with right now, so that it doesn't cause a lot of harm to your relationship. Because we've seen a really disturbing trend with people that we know, as well as people that we coach and deal with, that obviously times are rough right now, and it's taken a major impact and toll on our relationships. In fact, looking at a few statistics, just between 2020 and 2021, the divorce rate went up over 127%, and it's expected to be up even more than that now. So this is causing significant challenges for people. And we've also seen there are the common problems that couples deal with that we have a lot of approaches for to try to help. But we're also seeing what looks like the signs of post-traumatic stress syndrome, which again, we're not therapists, so this is not a diagnosis or anything or any kind of replacement for that. But people are kind of getting in that zombie-like state that sometimes you see, and that's causing their relationships to spiral even more downhill more quickly. And what we wanted to talk about today was some strategies and skills that first can help you kind of be aware of that if you're experiencing those challenges, and some ways to help cope or deal. Again, it's not a therapy. We're not replacing any medical advice. These are just some skills that you might want to try. So what we're going to talk about is first the two common areas that are needed for good relationships with couples. So we've got the whole universe divided into two little categories, so it's a gross oversimplification, but it'll help you get a kind of an idea of where we're going with that. From talking about those two areas, we then will go into the two most common challenges that we see happen with couples when they transition from just being giddy and excited about their relationship to being together for longer term. Those two things we see all the time. And with our programs, again, we don't do therapy. We provide the high massage system and other types of training programs. But we see that a lot, and we have some strategies for dealing with that.
And it can cover the whole gambit from just, from taking each other for granted to, full-on arguments and abuse, as far as the degrees of challenges that marriages have. In fact, we're now in summertime, and we turned on the air, and Steve's like, "Oh, I'm so thankful that the air turned on." And I was like, yeah. And it's one of those things that, again, we take for granted, is that we have air conditioner, we just turn it on and we feel much better.
Well, the reason I say that is the last time I did that last year, it didn't turn on.
Yeah. And somebody was crawling under that.
I've forgotten about that. I'm like, oh,
it wasn't me.
Yeah. But I wasn't expecting it to be as hot today as it was, because we've been enjoying the weather. And then I thought, I should have turned the air conditioner on yesterday to check just in case, 'cause otherwise we'll be uncomfortable talking to you guys today. But taking things for granted is a huge factor. But so we're going to cover the two main categories that we've seen that help a relationship be a good, solid relationship. Then we're going to talk about two of the common challenges couples face normally in life. And then we're going to go into the unfortunate enhanced stress that we've seen a lot more recently with couples, and some possible ways to deal with that. The interesting thing is the research that I did with High was focusing on the distal aspects of the vagus nerve, and that caused me to intensely study that area. So I came across Dr. Stephen Porges' work on polyvagal theory, and I did a lot of investigation with that when I was doing graduate research in anorgasmia with women, and it actually potentially applies in these applications as well. So that's what we'll go into. We'll cover how you can use some skills from that area to help your relationship. Now, the first topic is what makes a good relationship. And again, this is a gross oversimplification, but we've kind of boiled it down to two areas. The first area is, are you on the same page about life with your partner? Now, that includes, because a lot of people say it's about money, it's about sex, it's about this, it's about that. True, those are little parts of it, but the core question is, are you on the same page with where you're going in life? Do you have the same vision for life? Do you want the same things? The challenge with a lot of relationships is couples don't talk about that. They just make assumptions about how the other person is, and a lot of times they don't even truly know what they want in life, because we're young and we're just figuring stuff out. So that's the first category. Now, we're not going to answer all those questions today. I just want to put it there that, and that includes...
And communicating that is so important.
Yes, and that gets into the second major area that's needed, which is how you treat each other. And that includes communication, sharing, this is what I want to do with life, whether it's starting a business, whether it's having a career, whether it's having kids, your religion, just the whole, where you want to live. It also includes sexual orientation, because many times there's a whole scope of the human condition, and sometimes they don't talk about that, or sexual interest. And we've found that more than 90% of couples that we've encountered don't really honestly tell each other what's going on. So those are the two big, if you want to, again, take the whole universe and compress it down to two categories for a good relationship, it boils down to getting on the same page with each other, and or being able to be on the same page about what you want out of life, and treating each other well, communicating what your needs are, working with your partner.
An analogy we were using earlier with somebody is, when you're at a restaurant, what do you tell the waiter or waitress? You tell them exactly what you want to order. If you're there for breakfast, with your omelet, what you want on your omelet and everything. If you don't, they're going to show up with maybe the special of the day. They can't read your mind. So it's the same thing with your partner, to communicate.
Yes, absolutely. Now, as far as what we've seen that tends to happen in relationships, we get two bigger complaints with things. Basically, Yeah, I'd say that those are the two big ones. The first is couples get a mismatch in their sexual interest. Usually one partner will be, or they start out and everybody's just happy and on cloud nine, and you do, whatever you do and it works, and you're intimate, and you're happy, you think your partner's happy, life is good. But then as time goes by, especially if you have kids or if you start a new career, one partner may not be as interested in sexual activity as the other. And that starts causing frustration because the partner that is more interested is using the same strategy that they always used, and it's not working now. So
Could be health challenges is another.
Children is a
factor.
Major impotence or change that happens with that a lot of times.
Affecting hormonal changes.
Yes, and the ironic thing that we've found, and ask yourself this question, if you're in a relationship right now, a lot of times the partner that isn't as interested in sexual activity will then later be in the mood, but they drop subtle hints as far as what they, that they are, and the other partner that's normally more interested doesn't pick up on it. Stereotypically, that's the guy watching the game, and now the wife's in the mood, and he doesn't realize it, so they miss out on that opportunity. And what ends up happening is the partner that's more sexually frustrated starts masturbating, and then later they both end up masturbating separately. They don't tell each other, and they're missing out on sharing that experience together. There's nothing wrong with sexual expression through masturbation, in my personal opinion. But if you're doing that separately with your partner and not telling each other, that's you're missing out.
Breakdown in communication.
Yes. So there are ways you can deal with that, and we don't have time to go into all of that because we're going to cover a lot of stuff today. But the first and foremost way is basically being honest with each other about what your needs are and what it takes to take care of each other's needs. A lot of times couples never talk about what sex even means. Is it intercourse? Is it oral sex? Is it masturbation? Is it sexual thoughts? So they have different ideas of what it is. So the first thing to do is to sit down with your partner and say, hey, I want to be honest with you about this, and I want to take care of your needs. And we actually have a model we go through with our training program where sexuality is viewed as an extension of massage. And now it's much more than that. It creates life, potentially, but it basically is a extension of massage. And if you treat it that way, if your partner comes home and they're just stressed out, you can say, hey, would you like a massage? And you give them a massage, and that's it. You don't do more if they don't want more. You honor their request. But at the same, and a lot of times it's interesting, and I'm probably going to sound stereotypical here, but I'll talk to a lot of women and even sexologists, some that are normally, I would think they're very, very open-minded, and they love that idea of their partner just going, hey, yeah, I'll give you a back rub, and you're not interested in anything more, that's perfectly fine. But the flip side of it is if your partner comes home and they're sexually frustrated and you're not in the mood, are you willing to do something to give them sexual release? And ironically, a lot of people that normally are very open-minded, they go, well, no, I wouldn't do that. I'm like, well, why not? Well, that'd be sex work. That'd be, yeah. But if you're together with your partner, taking care of each other's needs, isn't that something you should be willing to do, especially if they're willing to massage you without any requirement, if you just want to help each other relax and take care of each other. That mindset, if you can get to that, where you just take care of
pay it forward mentality.
Yeah.
And so many people, it's sort of like, oh, I do this for you and you do that for me, kind of like a gift exchange.
Yes. In fact, we were talking with someone just earlier this week about that, because there's, and again, there's not time to go into all the details on this, but one key thing is there are at least 5 different major meanings of love. And English, there are actually many, many more. Sanskrit has a huge number. Greek has even more. But love is defined by the context in English, just like sex is defined by the context. So you have to kind of figure out what the other person said to figure out the meaning of the love they're talking about. That makes things real confusing because a lot of times partners have never sat down and said, what does love mean? You know,
I remember in, I think it was second grade, because the teacher was like, well, what does going steady mean in second grade? And a little boy goes, that just means when you go and hold hands and walk together to the drinking fountain. So that was his definition of what going steady meant in second grade.
Yeah. So that's something that if you can get clear with your partner, because love can be an erotic attraction, love can be a romantic attraction, love can be a feeling of lust, friendship, bonding, family, caring for children. It can be a spiritual connection. There's a wonderful word in, I believe it's Sanskrit called, and I'm not gonna say it right, so forgive me if I brutalize this. If you're Indian, mudita, I think is the word, which is a love for a friend or your partner where you just want them to do well. If you hear that a friend got a promotion or
you're genuinely happy for that person.
Yes, and the unfortunate thing is our culture in the West tends to teach a point system, a commerce-based love, which is another thing. I mean, giving a massage for sexual purposes in exchange for money is a commerce form, and that's not really love. That's a form of sex. But a lot of people, they don't really think about what it means to them. And if you are withholding sexual activity because of some kind of point system, or you're mad, or they got to do this, or you got to do that, that's basically what you're doing.
For couples to do.
Yeah, and they don't even realize it. So the first thing is just get on the same page about what your needs are and be able to express it. So that is the first major challenge that we've seen couples face. That typically happens if they have kids after the first child's born and the libido drops. Also later in life with menopause, with women, with men. A lot of times, and that's happening a lot more. We're seeing that a great deal. Men's libido will be dropping, and they'll have ED and all sorts of issues with that. So that's the first area. The second area that we commonly hear people talk about is they just don't feel like they have the same spark or the same attraction they had when they first met, and that happens, and there's a reason for why that happens, and there's a way to help bring that back. What it really comes down to is when you first meet your partner and you are expressing your affection for them, you are looking at them in a certain way. You're saying you love them and you like them in a certain way. You're doing certain physical things, hugging them in a certain way. You're showering them with affection, and that's that's the way it should be. And your partner's doing the same thing.
The stops, so to speak.
Yes, your partner's doing the same thing for you, and that's great. Well, a particular subset of what you were doing is what's triggering that giddy feeling for them. The challenge is you may not know what that subset is. You're just doing stuff, and it's working, and you're happy. But then once you get comfortable in your relationship and your partner gets comfortable, you default back to what works for you. You might really want your partner to look at you in a certain way visually, and you look at them, or you do visual things for them. But
your partner wants you to say certain things to them.
Yeah, they don't hear it. And they say they just don't feel that loving feeling anymore. And all it really comes down to is you don't realize you're not communicating the same way you did before. You still love each other. I mean, that's a common complaint I get, particularly with guys. They're like, nothing is working. I'm trying to let my partner know I care about him, and it's just like they just don't get it. And and a lot of times it is simply communication. So those are the two big stumbling steps we see in a lot of couples. First, a mismatch of sexual desire and not being able to take care of it, and then not expressing love and connection in a way that works for them. Now, again, getting back to those two big categories of being on the same page about life, if you want to start a high-risk startup and travel the world, and your partner wants to get a stable job, in a big company and wait to retire, you're probably going to have problems. That's a being on the same page thing. So that's stuff you need to get figured out in advance. But then just the communication. So those are the two big things. But with the pandemic, Sorry if my chair is squeaking here. We've seen something else happen that is kind of concerning. People have become more withdrawn, and it's like they from the isolation, from well, literally isolation and separation of people,
not knowing how to interact as much as before.
Yes, and it seems like they alternate between being kind of withdrawn and it's hard to get going, and then exploding and being angry, or being addicted to the news, wanting to see something to keep them constantly stimulated. And we've seen a lot of people that have said they're going to break up. And, like, well, you were in fact, quite a few divorces of people that really shocked us here in the last year or so. And we're thinking, well, what is going on? And it occurred to me that when I was studying anorgasmia, especially with Dr. Porges' theories, with polyvagal theory, a lot of people were exhibiting the telltale signs of mild post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, again, we're not making any medical diagnosis. We're not therapists for that. But they were exhibiting the behavior of that, and I'll explain what that is from a polyvagal theory standpoint, and how that can impact your relationship here. And also talk about some ways to deal with it. But polyvagal theory was developed by a wonderful person named Steve Porges. He's a professor of psychiatry at UNC, my old undergrad alma mater. He's a senior.
Looking forward to interviewing him, hopefully soon.
He's an amazing person. And he works at the Kinsey Institute as a senior scientist, and is just a brilliant guy. What he did was he initially started out studying babies' heartbeats and heart rate if you've heard of heart rate variability, he's one of the original guys with that stuff. And he was looking at it from the traditional standpoint that most people in psychology had, that you have the fight or flight on one side, the run and survive, which is getting you your sympathetic nervous system, and then on the other side you had the parasympathetic, or the relax, reproduce, and digest mode. And he viewed that as the two parameters, but some things weren't making sense with some of those babies, because he would normally think if their heart's beating fast, their parasympathetic system, premature babies in particular, their parasympathetic system will kick in and slow their heart rate down. But what he was finding in these premature babies is a lot of times their parasympathetic system was becoming lethal. It was causing them to stop breathing and have shutdowns that he didn't understand. And that led him over about 20 years to come up with what he calls polyvagal theory, which I'd love to spend hours talking about it because it's a fascinating topic, but I won't. Don't worry. I won't explain that in a lot of detail.
We'll add a series of videos for that.
Yes, but what it basically means is we have three systems in our bodies. There's not just the fight and flight and the rest and digest. There is a third system that rest and digest is kind of grouped in a big category. You've got the fight or flight. Then you have the freeze and hide. If you ever see a lizard, the lizard alternates between running around and doing stuff and freezing. Or a mouse in a field. If a cat catches the mouse, or a possum, plays dead. Well, what's going on is that, and Dr. Porges calls it the dorsal vagal aspect of the parasympathetic nervous system. That is the primitive part of the body that causes us to freeze. His notion is that when we were, not we, but when ancient creatures were just kind of crawling along the seabed, their defense mechanism was, if they thought there was a predator or something, they would just hide. They would just completely freeze and not move. And hopefully whatever was hunting them would miss out on them and move on by, so they'd live another day. Well, then the more advanced aspect of the nervous system was the run, or the fight or flight, and those were the two things. But we're much more fancy creatures. We have this wonderful thing, which is a more advanced nervous system, that also allows us to very carefully control the fight or flight versus the shutdown aspect. It used to be just a battle between those two things, and if you look at reptiles and creatures like that, that's still what's there. This modern system we have does a couple things. It very closely controls the fight or flight response in conjunction with the calming down response, and it controls our facial expressions and how we can hear and how we vocalize things. And that, I won't bore you too much more with the details about that, but I wanted to mention that because the cranial nerves as well, the vagus nerve is the cranial 10 nerve, but another nerve, as well as part of the vagus nerve, well, it's another nerve actually, cranial nerve, controls a tiny little muscle in your ear, and it also controls things that are related to blood flow in various parts of your brain. And when you are in relaxed calm mode, you know, you're just chilling out, your ear muscle contracts to a particular length that optimizes it for hearing human speech, and those mid to higher range frequencies, and your brain is really, really well attuned to picking up on that and being able to focus on it. But if you are in a state of crisis where basically you're looking for a predator or a threat, that your eardrum changes, that muscle changes the tension of your eardrum.
Chronic PTSD.
And it makes it harder to hear the sound ranges that your partner is going to be speaking in, and it makes it harder for your brain to actually focus on them. So you
I
can
remember there was a Seinfeld episode about that. They
really?
called it the small talk, the silent talker or something like that, and nobody could tell what she was saying, and he ended up wearing this ugly looking puppet shirt because she asked him if he would wear it on the show, and he finally got tired of asking her because he couldn't understand what he was saying, so he just said, "Oh sure, yeah."
Well, gotcha. Well, that's basically what is happening, and we've seen this with people. Is you'll get together with your partner and you will want to talk about stuff and work stuff out, but it's darn hard to hear them, and it's hard to stay focused on them, and what you are focusing on is looking for things they're saying that could be hostile, or how to defend against whatever this attack is they're going to do. And if your partner's,
you're already like in that state,
you're primed for fighting.
Primed.
And a lot of people can't get out of that mode. They're kind of stuck in it, because what's going on is they are alternating between being in the I'm depressed and can't move to I'm revved up watching the news, you know, saying the world's going to end, for whether it's murder hornets or, you know, wars or all that stuff, pandemic. It's got us freaked out. So we're alternating between those two states. And if we're in a depressed state, we're not paying attention to our partner. And then when we go into the hyper excited state, it's really hard to pay attention, and what we do pick up from what they're saying is more likely to be interpreted as something negative, not something constructive and wanting to work things out. So being in those two states makes it really, really hard to have a constructive conversation with your partner.
And it affects your health as well.
Yes, in a big way. And if both partners, a lot of times we've seen, are in that state. Now, that also, in that hyperexcited state, it causes you to not sleep as well, because your cortisol levels are through the roof. And with your normally you have this kind of yin-yang thing going on between melatonin and cortisol in your body, and several other hormones. But the melatonin, well, there are a lot of new theories about it, but I won't go into the details, but basically you have a sleep phase that's recovery at night, and then starting about 3 or 4 in the morning, you kick into a wake-up phase where you start getting cortisol released, and
and the sun's coming up, the blue light.
Yeah, but even before that, about 3 or 4 in the morning, you're starting to release cortisol to wake you up. Now, if you've noticed since the pandemic and with all the other stuff that you're waking up at 3 or 4 or 5 in the morning, and it's hard to get back to sleep, and for whatever horrible reason, every single thought you have is about all the bad stuff that's going to happen, and all the stuff you've forgotten about that you got to do, and all this stuff you're missing out on. That is most likely due to that elevated cortisol. you're dumping a huge amount into
the
your
past
body.
10 fights you and your partner had.
Yeah. So you wake up early, you can't sleep, then you're really tired at 10 or 11, and you slam a bunch of coffee, which dumps more cortisol into your system, and you stay in that hyped up state. Well, your body prioritizes converting the cortisol is made from DHEA, and which is a precursor that our kidneys and mainly made in our kidneys, or adrenal glands and a couple other areas. That DHEA is converted into cortisol. That is prioritized when we're stressed. That raw material is also made into testosterone. It's also made into progesterone. It's also made into many other important estrogen to a degree, although estrogen can be from other things too. And if you are producing massive amounts of cortisol, you will run out of that raw material to make the other hormones that you need. And then you will not sleep as well the next night, which is when normally you recover those things. And you get in a more and more just burned out state. A friend of mine with a training center in England, he had some friends that were dealing with polycystic ovary syndrome. And so I looked into detail for that a few years ago and found some very, very fascinating observations. But they're basically, they have constant elevated cortisol. Long story. But so basically, you're getting together with your partner. It's harder to communicate without it being interpreted as being hostile. You can't hear them. They might be saying something to you across the room, and you don't even pick up on it because your ears are tuned to listen to threats that are lower frequencies, and then you just feel like crap because you're not sleeping well. That's the general state a lot of us are living in right now. And if you get back to those two fundamentals about good relationships, being on the same page about where you want to go in life, and also taking care of each other, i.e. communication, touch, all that stuff. If you're not on the same page about something, it's going to be a lot harder to work things out and get on the same page if you're in this really crappy state for each person. So that's the gloom and doom. That's the worst part of what's going on, because the big thing is in the past we would have a stressful situation, and it sucks. It's life periodically has really bad things that just get thrown at us. It's just, and you deal with it. And
roller coaster of life.
Yeah, but the point is you deal with it and you move on. With this pandemic, it has been constant almost, never ending. It's like, when are we going to have a relaxing time? So that's really weighed on us. That's causing a lot of...
Combined with the physical symptoms of what's going on, the cascade effect with long COVID.
That's another... I'm glad you mentioned that. Inflammation, I won't even go into detail on diet and all, but having elevated systemic inflammation, which also, by the way, having what I'll mention here in a moment, your vagal tone being out of whack, makes it more easy for your body to be inflamed. But having chronic inflammation makes it more likely just to be unhappy and angry about everything. So diet is another huge thing that I won't even really go into much here when I talk about things to do. But that is a huge important factor, that you do have a good diet that supports good health and reduces chronic inflammation. I mean, that's all the basic stuff. Try to avoid excessive sugars. Try to avoid inflammatory fats. A lot of vegetable oils, unfortunately, go towards the inflammatory pathways, and a lot of meats that we eat, or the animals are fed grains and all, which makes their fats inflammatory too. But what I want to talk about now is how to first identify if you think you have part of this stress reaction. Again, this is not a medical diagnosis. This is just something you can try. There are two techniques. And whether you do or don't, there are some techniques then we'll cover that can help you relax and diffuse what's going on, hopefully. The first technique is, and if you guys want, my chair is squeaky, so sorry to play along with this little game. Hopefully you can see this. Basically, take your hand, interlace your fingers, put it behind your head so that one set of fingers is touching here between the ridge of the muscle and the skull. The other set's there. So you're like here. So you're doing this. I don't know if you can see me very well. And I'm about 10 seconds behind real time. So I don't know if.
And I'll go behind
Yep.
you so I don't.
Okay.
We don't bump
we're here.
elbows.
Now, when you are doing this, you got your hands on each side of the neck. Take your eyes and look to the left real far, and then look to the right. And see if you feel a difference in the muscle tension in those muscles in your neck. Hopefully, you don't have to press hard. Hopefully, you'll feel a slight movement.
Mm-hmm.
Most
Kind of
people
near
do.
the each ridge.
Yeah, I'd say the name of the muscle, but honestly, I forgot the interface of the muscle
Me
there.
too.
So, but basically, as you're doing this, now let's play a little game together. What you're going to do is just hold your arms there, relax, and look to the left as far as you can look for 30 seconds. Let's count 1, 2. You're going to look to the left, and then you're going to look to the right for another 30 seconds. So to the left, 1, 2, 3. Looking as far as you can. 4, 5 to the left. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13.
And if you feel
14,
like you need to take
15,
a deep breath or
16,
yawn, that's a great
17,
thing.
18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. Now look to the right. 1, 2, 3,
And don't bump your
4,
partner.
sorry, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12.
Again, you're turning
13,
your eyes,
14.
not your head.
Yeah, the eyes to the 50. So your eyes are looking as far as you can to the right. 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 4, 25, 26.
And again, a
7,
deep breath or a
8,
yawn is a
9,
really
they're
good
up.
thing.
Okay, now just relax. Now, we mentioned the yawn a little bit prematurely. The question is, did you yawn?
Mm-hmm.
Did you feel the urge to go like that? Some people do, some people don't. The reason we're checking that is part of the vagus nerve, that part of the dorsal vagus, the old style, and the more modern vagus nerve innervates the bronchi and the parts of the lungs. And when you trigger a signal to tell that nerve to say, hey, relax, it actually causes that feeling want to take a deep breath. And if you ever are stressed out and you can't get a deep breath, that's actually that nerve causing constriction. Now, what looking to the left and the right does, and this is a key point I try to bring home with people, is this part of our brainstem, its function and activity, it doesn't have a little thinking you down there saying, okay, do this, do that. It does have you thinking higher up, and you thinking higher up causes changes in blood flow. But it's the changes in the blood flow and the muscle tension that actually affect the function of the nerve. So when you look this way and you look this way real far, that that causes the muscle to tug where there's a tiny little artery. I'd named the artery, but again, I forgot the name. I should have looked it up. Used to know it a long time ago. It causes that artery to open up slightly, and it makes a little bit more blood flow to that part of your brainstem.
Mm-hmm.
And when that happens, it causes a slight increase in the activity of that nerve. That causes the response in your lungs. Now, here's the thing. If you did not feel like you needed to take a deep breath, what that may mean, again, it's not a medical diagnosis because we're not therapists, we're not medical people, and but what that very well may mean is that you have chronic tension in that area due to clearly the pandemic psychological stress, or it could be due to health-related issues where a lot of people walking around looking at their phone.
Mm-hmm.
Well, guess what that's doing?
It's causing the
Pinching.
hump and pinching the nerve, and also causes the programmer's hump.
Yeah. So basically, you're making it harder to get blood flow to that part of your neck, and that is causing the nerve that sends the message to our lungs that says, hey, it's cool, chill out. That causes that to not function as well. Now,
and if you didn't yawn, it's good to repeat it several times.
mm-hmm.
Is it because some people have had to do it 3 or 4 times?
We have a friend of ours who we were showing that technique and some other relaxation techniques because she was having challenges, with constipation. And she did that technique every morning and night and a few other things, and it took 3 days, but then it resolved. And because these nerves control, well, I won't go into all the details, but they control a bunch of things in our body. But basically, the question is, did you yawn? And if not, maybe try that again and some other things we'll mention here to see if it can make you yawn more quickly. Because if you didn't yawn, what that is probably indicating, although again, not a medical diagnosis or vest, but that's probably indicating that you got tension here. Either it's psychological tension causing that to tighten up, or it's just something, mechanical going on with how your neck is or your position. One thing that we do with our high massager techniques is you hold this right here.
And you can hold it yourself or your partner easily use it.
Yes, because that targets the 2 areas where they'll tense up on the inside. But that's the first test that you can just do on yourself. See how quickly you breathe. Another thing you'll notice is yawns are contagious, and that's where
if we keep yawning.
that's where we again are amazing creatures. Because our eyes are telling our well, we don't truly know exactly how all the magic happens, but to go to the front part of our brain to recognize that, and that sends a signal to our more limbic region and then to the brain stem to say you should chill out too, because what that's signaling to people is it's time to relax, it's time to chill out.
Okay.
And that's where it's so important to be able to be in that state, because the point of your fight or flight or your shutdown state. Am I on the same? Hopefully you can see my hands. Fight or flight or shutdown state is you've got to have this third system. Steve Porges called it the social engagement, the ventral vagus. Yeah, you got to have this third system which acts like a conductor to say, okay, shift to this.
Well, it's like the other day, and I'm sure you can tell if you're out in nature, we were listening to the birds, and then we heard a different kind of it was more like a high-pitched chirp, and then we saw a little bird coming out and like trying to dodge down at a crow, and there's a bird's nest in the bushes here. And so they switched from whatever their regular singing was to alarm mode.
Yeah so that's so we communicate all sorts of amazing stuff to each other, but basically that is the first technique that we wanted to cover. That's more just a way to see how well you react to stress with things. Now, if you want, there are exercises where you just look, and they do this in yoga, they do this in many different healing modalities, where you just look to the left and the right a lot. All that's doing is that's increasing the circulation in that part of your brain. Another area that you can check is it's called your cardiac vagal tone, and for that you measure your pulse, and you can do it. There are fancy watch applications you can use for this that are amazing, but basically you measure. My pulse is a little bit over 60, mid 60s right now, and just breathing normally. Then you measure it when you breathe in, and then you hold your breath. And you see how quickly it slows down. Basically, what you're doing is when you're breathing in, your heart should speed up a little bit. And when you exhale, your heart should slow down a little bit. And that is the very, very fine control from your brain stem and the vagus nerve on your breathing, because when you're pulling oxygen into your lungs, you want to pump the blood through the lungs as fast as possible to exchange it. But then when you're holding your breath or exhaling, then you've got carbon dioxide in your lungs, and you don't want that exchanged back into your blood. So you want that to be breathed out. What you'll find is people that, in fact, a lot of the people that we know that have gotten divorced, they had very, very poor cardiac vagal tone. which meant they were in that hyper stress state, the part of their body that monitors and helps control shifting between being shut down and being hyper just wasn't working right. So those are two ways you can tell.
A lot of times people aren't breathing as deep wearing masks as well.
That's a very good point. That's a very, very good point. So those are two things to think about. Now, how can you deal with that? How can you make things better? Well, the first and foremost, is physical exercise. Aerobic exercise that you do, especially if you can do something with your partner.
Walking is a great exercise to do with your partner if you can walk in nature together.
Yes, that one thing that Dr. Porges would say is to socialize, you need to first mobilize. You've got to, if you're in that state, or if you're hyper agitated, doing regular exercise can make a huge difference. If those exercises help your posture, if you're squatting, looking down all the time, that's another big thing that can improve that. Now, another key thing with your partner when you're trying to talk about your relationship or just looking and hanging out is look at each other. People these days are walking around looking in their phone. By looking at your partner, and especially when you're smiling and you're communicating things, then you're sending them signals that they are picking up on. And that is very, very important.
And a lot of times you'll see the opposite recommended by by coaches or therapists, because to make you feel more comfortable on the date, sit side by side, but you're really missing out on that social engagement and interaction of being with your partner, disengage from your phones, and actually engage in real conversation together.
Yes, and a great thing to do, the eating behavior is telling that part of our monkey brain, the ventral vagal system, is telling us it must be safe because we're eating. So if you can make it a point to eat with your partner where you're not stressed and you can look at each other and talk. And also, for starters, give each other a break. You have been through a lot, and so have they.
Yes.
And you're still going through a lot. And just say, hey, sorry if I've been hard to deal with, and I'm not going to hold it against you. We've just been through a tough time. Because these systems, the system that makes it harder, that I just talked about, that makes it harder for us to hear each other and focus, that actually is, these things aren't bad in and of themselves. They're reactions that have kept us alive. I mean, if you were out in the woods walking around talking with your partner and suddenly you heard a low rumbling growl, then it's kind of handy that your brain's going to switch to that, so you can real quickly tell where that whatever that is a possible threat's coming from. Yeah. So these things that help us survive in nature, however, sometimes screw our relationships up.
I think they would have kind of those jokes in the Indiana Jones movies where, like, why don't you look at me when I'm talking? And then there's a snake on her head or something that he had to cut off.
So that's whether there's truth to that. There really is. So another thing you can do, we're talking about eating together. Eat together. Look at each other.
Interact.
Yeah, so many families have lost that connection where they had dinner together every night or breakfast every morning, or at least once a week. And we've gotten where we're just eating while we're driving and working. But the act of eating stimulates that system. And look at each other and give each other a break and think, we're going to figure out how to deal with this. This is just a big bump in the road that we will figure out how to handle. Another key thing, if you can do it, is a technique where you lay down with your partner. Ideally, you can do it in the morning or before bed, or in the morning or at bedtime, and one partner just breathes deeply and relaxes. And then you follow them. You are in a spooning position and you copy their breathing. And if you sync it, you'll kind of start feeling like you're the same breath. And that helps get something about your nervous systems in sync together that can really help a lot. So that's
one of the things that really resonated when we were Reading one of Steve Porges' books is it's important in the partner's responsibility, each partner's responsibility to cultivate a safe environment,
Yes.
For your partner.
And that, I'm so glad you mentioned that. That's Steve Porges will say that it's a responsibility of each partner to make the other partner feel safe. Because the key thing about this middle part of our nervous system that is the conductor that shifts from the not moving depressed to the fight or flight and helps create a balance is you have to feel safe for the healing processes to happen. So it's good to, when you're with your partner, try to do things that are relaxing and aren't going to have you hyped up and hyper all the time with it.
And that can be defined differently, like we were talking about what is sex, what is love, by each individual person. So that's also an important part of communication.
Yes.
Which helping to reduce that stress response with your partner, is a key good start.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I want to make sure I don't forget any other main things. Other big things that I wanted to touch on. We talked about exercise. If you can exercise with your partner, if you can engage in any kind of activity that's interactive with your partner, whether it's dancing, martial arts, where you're in skating, anything that you're doing physical activity together, and you've got to get each other's input. That helps get you synced back up together in a way that's very good. If you can be in nature, that's a huge thing. Going for walks together. And another big thing is making sure that you get enough sleep at night, which we talked about. That there's a whole separate section that we talk about for sleep, where one thing is wearing earplugs. As long as you don't have a young child, you have to be able to wake up for. If one partner or both partners snores, there are many things you can do for sleep, but get plenty of sleep and try to
getting back on the physical activity, also playing together. A lot of times, whether it's as a family or with your partner too, playing games together, trying new adventures together, whether that's hiking, going on trips together. It could be short trips, say you just want to do something slightly adventurous or hiking together, because there's a different mechanism that kind of kicks in when you're playing, and we might do a whole separate video on that, playing together with other, adults, like whether you're like men fighting together or wrestling together. Sports. Yeah.
That's, and in polyvagal theory, what Dr. Porges talks about is you have the one stage is the shutdown stage, the other stage is the fight or flight, and you're seriously going to fight stage. But then you have other combination stages where you have the fight or flight combined with the more advanced relaxed thing, and that is play. Or you have the relaxed state combining with the shutdown state, and that's sexual activity and regenerative healing activity for sleep, things like that. So there are many combinations. That's a great point. If you can come up with a sport to do with your partner, that we found that helps a lot of people, as far as just getting back relaxed and together. So because again, ultimately what you're wanting to do is get back to what got you together in the first place. We call it building your base, finding some common ground that keeps you together and gives you meaning and helps you be happy together. So
for us, that's dancing. For other couples, it may be pickleball or tennis or whatever, or trying new things.
Yeah, we met at a ballroom dance club 22 years ago, and still enjoy dancing. Yes. And so lots of good stuff there. So those are a few of the main areas. There is a technique that we teach called intimacy massage, which is wonderful for getting back in sync in many different ways, which you're welcome to explore if you want. And we have the Magical Mystery Date program, which helps deal with that first question that couples had, where they feel like they've lost the connection together and don't feel that spark. That date actually takes you through.
This really gets that going again. I mean, the feedback we've gotten from couples has been amazing. That it's just re-sparked their relationship to new levels that they, haven't experienced in years, and some even said that they've never experienced before.
Yeah. So that's fun stuff.
Yes.
But that kind of covers the topic. I'm going to summarize again real quick. Basically, in our opinion, good relationships have two big categories met. Number one, they're on the same page with their partner about what they want out of life. And number two, they take care of each other and are good to each other. And that includes communication, physical techniques, all
Setting
that
up
stuff.
a safe environment.
Again, that's grossly oversimplifying it, but those are the two big categories. The big two challenges pre-pandemic and whenever that we found with couples is, number one, they'll have mismatched sexual interest and they don't have a way of resolving that and dealing with that together. And number two, they aren't communicating to each other in the way they used to, that really made the other one feel that giddy feeling or feel that love feeling, and they think, oh, well, the love's gone. Well, no, in reality, you're just not communicating the same way you used to, and you can bring that back. And the other big part there is understanding that love goes through ebbs and flows and different states as you go through different phases of your life, and it's part of the journey together. So those are the two classic challenges we see with couples. And then with the pandemic, this chronic stress that we have has caused people to get into that stress, almost like post-traumatic stress syndrome.
And it's heightened with the isolation because people don't have that direct interaction and facial expressions we were talking about earlier.
Yes, and that's caused, and a big challenge that people don't realize that causes is it makes it so it's literally harder to hear and understand your partner. And if you both are in that state, it also, what you do hear, you will have a higher chance of interpreting it as being something hostile. And that's just a bad combination when you're trying to work out a relationship. So what we mentioned after that was there are some tests to tell your what's called the vagal tone, or how quickly your recovery system is working. There's the test with the deep breath, and then there's cardiac vagal tone testing with your pulse. Those are just two ways to do it. There, you can get a watch that can do amazing stuff with heart rate variability studies, and it can tell you all sorts of interesting things, but that's way beyond the scope of what we can talk about here. And then there are the ways to deal with that, which the big things are just move together, get exercise, talk, try to eat together, look at each other. Physical touch, I forgot to mention that earlier, is critical. Touching your partner, hugging them, and
doing the exercise we did earlier is helpful.
Yes. So those are the major points. But we really appreciate you joining us today.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, hopefully this will give you a skill or two that you can add to your tool belt to use for yourself and for your partner, and to enjoy life more and to feel better about things. So thank you guys again, and take care, and we'll be back here.
Thank you, and
soon.
try that exercise every day.